I have two phones right here. So this is the next-gen Xiaomi 15 Ultra, and it has the greatest camera system that I have ever seen on a phone. Okay, so let's say we wanted to zoom into that cathedral over there. We keep going, we're at 10x, 20x, go all the way to 120 times, capture. Oh my God, that's ridiculous. Then this is the company's even more bonkers, never before seen or covered Future phone that, let's just say, isn't even close to anything I've used before. This thing is so precious that someone has actually flown all the way from China to hand deliver the thing. So let's find out what makes this crazy and then what makes this even crazier. So this is how the 15 Ultra comes presented. Pretty classic Xiaomi style insert on top, which has a SIM ejector, a USB-C cable, manuals, and then a hard shell clear case. And that is it. Even though this is a full-size box, there's still no charger. Probably because the phone's camera alone takes up half the space. Man, I'm butchering this peel. Okay, there we go. Wow. This looks incredible. Now, there is lots to like and dislike about this phone, but there's only one thing that I want to show you with it. One thing that I do think is an absolute game changer, and that is this. I'm not even talking about the cameras in general, literally this one specific telephoto zoom camera. Because here's the thing, for the entire history of multi-camera smartphones, you've had a main camera, your best quality camera, and then a few secondary cameras flanking that main camera, which aren't as high quality. But this phone is the first time that I would say that that's not the case. This telephoto camera is so freaking good that it has now basically become my main camera, and that completely changes how you use the thing. So the first place that you're going to notice this zoom camera in action is, well, it's when you're zooming into things. For a very long time, Samsung has kind of set the benchmark for long-range zoom photography. And if we take a look at their latest S25 Ultra, they achieved that with a 5x optical zoom, 50 megapixel camera, which is great. But this special camera right here is a 4.3x optical zoom camera, so actually a little less than Samsung, but it's 200 megapixel. And it's not just resolution, because as we know, resolution is not exactly the most reliable spec. It only takes a very quick look at the telephoto cameras on these two phones to see that the sensor on Xiaomi's is enormous. It's over 3 times the size of the one on the Samsung. That's the spec that matters. So let's say, for example, we want to zoom into some of the intricate brickwork on that window. Let's start with the Samsung, which, as you'd expect, looks really crisp up until about 30 times where it does break down. But let's keep going until 100 times zoom, take the shot, and that is not bad at all, considering how far away the thing is. Okay, so same thing on Xiaomi now. As we keep zooming in, the preview does look a little bit cleaner than it did on Xiaomi, but also not dramatically so. That is until we hit capture, because geez Louise. At this point, it is an absolute landslide win for Xiaomi. And that's partly because of this really high quality, high resolution zoom camera, but it is also partly because of AI processing. So when you zoom in past the 20 times mark on the Xiaomi, you will see this little AI indicator pop up. If that's yellow, it means that when you take the shot, it's going to comb through and essentially upgrade everything using its best estimation of what it thinks they look like. And this part of the equation, you might completely hate, because the more AI is involved in your photography, the more it begs that ever-present question of what actually is a photo. But I do think that it's quite tastefully integrated here. It feels so satisfying to see your blurry 120 times zoom photos suddenly transform after you've captured. The results can be weird, let's say 5% of the time, but then they are actually making the photo a lot better 95% of the time. The setting isn't hidden away inside some sort of clunky image editor. It's literally one click to turn on and off just before you capture. And also, even when it's turned off, this is still fundamentally the best zoom camera that I've ever used on a phone. So it's got a great zoom camera. It takes great zoom photos. That much is not the slightest bit surprising. The bigger change that you notice is when you start to use this camera for other things. So, for example, if you grab this, and let's start by recording video using the phone's normal wide camera, this is how it will look. It's nice. The phone's got a top-of-the-line 1-inch sensor for this wide camera, but it still looks like phone footage. But now, flicking over to the phone's telephoto camera, it's a complete vibe change. It does have that professional camera look to it. And that's partly the fact that telephoto cameras just in general have more background blur, but it's combining that with this supersized sensor, which means that you both get even more of that separation because bigger sensors make more of it, but then also with basically zero hit to the quality of the footage, like you would have on just about any other phone in which the telephoto camera gets pretty shafted. This is like full quality 8K. Plus, you can film slow motion using this same lens, 4K 120 frames per second. And for a phone, this is as cinematic as it has gotten thus far. And it's all topped off with portrait mode. Because portraits of people will always be more flattering when you take a few steps back and use a telephoto camera, better telephoto camera equals better portraits. And remember, you don't even need to use portrait mode to get this effect. All of these coming shots are just simple photos taken on auto. So don't get me wrong, Xiaomi has issues that they need to work on, like their software update schedule, the fact that this phone is pretty awkward to handle, but the point is, this camera ain't one of them. You know what they need to do next? They need to give this telephoto camera a really short minimum focusing distance so that it could also become your macro camera too. That would be next level. But yeah, that's the key cool thing about the Xiaomi 15 Ultra. And then there's just little AI tidbits like AI Expand that I would say works just as well as Samsung's generative image editor, which is a compliment. Plus AI Sky, which I've always thought was a cool feature, and now I guess thanks to more intelligent processing, it's also a pretty powerful feature. I could totally see how if you were listing your house for sale and you wanted a sunny shot to sell it, then this is a way more reliable way of guaranteeing it as opposed to waiting for one. So now it's time to step up. What do you do when even that camera isn't enough? Well, this is the Xiaomi concept camera system. There's only 10 to 20 of them in the world, and Xiaomi has specifically designed them to prove a single point. So you get the phone, and then you get this lens. So let's be very clear about something for a minute. The idea of adding a professional lens to your phone is not a new one. I mean, you've been able to buy phone camera lenses on Amazon for like 15 years now. Not to mention, even Xiaomi themselves have tried to properly integrate a lens system onto one of their previous concept phones. But this is the first time that I've ever seen the camera attach onto the middle of the phone. There's a reason. So the issue with what's been done for years now is that it doesn't really matter how great the lens that you make is. If you're putting that lens on top of a phone-sized camera sensor, there's a limit to how good it's going to be. There's a limit to how much light it's going to be able to process. There's a limit to detail. Because while the lens can absolutely direct the light, ultimately, it's the camera sensor that's recording that light and turning it into the end photo. So what Xiaomi's decided is, if you actually wanted to avoid all bottlenecks, if you actually wanted to make a phone capable of big camera photography, then you really need to create both an external lens and an external sensor. So this might look like it's just a lens, but this is actually a full system designed in-house by Xiaomi that contains both. Think of this like an entire camera, just without a screen. And you might have the same initial reaction that I had to this, which is, why would you do that? Look at this phone. It already has its own full set of internal cameras here. Why on earth would you ignore all of that and stick this entirely separate new camera on top? At that point, like, what is this even for? Well, this is where the magic happens. So the lens snaps onto place on the back of the phone with some very strong magnets. But this isn't just to like hold it in place so that you can pair the two via Bluetooth. There's actually two very tiny little pins on this to create, and this is absolutely pivotal, an instant hardware connection. This is actually a brand new piece of tech that Xiaomi is calling LaserLink. They've developed it specifically for this phone. And the idea is that thanks to these pins and a couple of extra bits of engineering on the inside, you get two major perks. A, that you can now power this camera entirely just using the phone's internal battery, which immediately means that you don't now have a whole extra gadget that you have to persistently worry about keeping charged. And B, that you get nanosecond level data transfer between this camera and the image signal processor in the phone, which means they can basically communicate in real time, which means this phone can treat this camera as if it were baked inside of it. And that is a big deal. It means that literally the exact split second that you snap this thing on, you'll see this icon pop up in your camera app that you can use to switch to this lens, which is not normal. Every concept phone that I've used up until this point has had potential, some sort of cool feature that works, but with just about everything else surrounding it being really clunky. And so it's quite surprising just how refined of an experience this feels. And just think about what it means. It means that all of a sudden you are shooting using this. You're getting all the benefits of high-end optics. So this is a 100 megapixel, 35mm f1.4 lens with a 4/3 sensor. So in English, that's basically extreme resolution with a sensor that is twice the size of the biggest sensors on any smartphone to take advantage of that resolution. And with a pro-level lens that's built similarly to the way a smartphone's lens is built, just with enough space to actually execute it properly. And you can have that all with the intelligent AI software processing that's been being optimized on smartphones for like the last 15 years plus. It means that you get smartphone features, like I can still use things like live motion photos like AI face beautification or even portrait mode if I wanted to add even more background blur, none of which you would get on a normal DSLR camera. You never need to charge this camera. There's no separate SD cards or like separate apps that you need to install to manage the footage that comes from it. Everything that you take on it will just save directly into your phone's gallery for sharing or editing. The thing even has a precision motor inside of it for autofocus, but even without that, it just feels so crazy to be able to manually be adjusting the focus on my lens here, feeling the subtle vibrations from that action created by the vibration motors inside the phone, and then just the second I decide I'm done, snapping it off as if it was just a mini power bank or something. I took this thing out for a day trip yesterday, and it does give the exact feeling of having a premium compact camera. You might have seen ones like the Fuji X100s that have been picking up in popularity. Using this is very close to the feel of using something like that. And so while it is way more clunky than just taking shots on your phone's internal cameras, it's way less clunky than carrying around a whole extra external camera and all of the extra fiddling that comes with that. And the difference between this and a phone camera is absolutely indisputable. Like, even my grandparents would have no issue being able to see it, especially as it becomes even more pronounced at night. Okay, two caveats that I did pick up on are, one, the battery is not great on this, and that's because this concept is based on a Xiaomi 15, but to fit the power delivery mechanism required to get power from the phone's internal battery to this camera, they've actually had to shrink the size of the battery that the phone would normally come with, which is acceptable for a concept, but should Xiaomi ever come to releasing a final product like this, it's an issue they'd need to figure out. And then two is just the fact that this isn't like the best lens ever. As of right now, this doesn't quite match the image quality that you could get from something like the Fuji. But to their credit, solvable issue. I imagine that they've rattled this together quite quickly just to demo the point of what it does. But now that this whole laser link system is built and it works, then I can't see a reason why they couldn't just work with a company like Leica and co-build an entire system of really top-end lenses that have built-in sensors, and hell, you could have completely different types of accessories. Like, there's no reason you couldn't have an 8 terabyte storage drive that would snap onto the back and be able to instantly read and write just like internal storage because of the physical connection from the pins. Does this have mainstream potential? Maybe. I'm not yet convinced, but I mean, at the very least, this is as convinced as I ever have been by a concept phone. And just to really drill home what it's like to shoot on it, let's say I was filming a sponsor section for Surfshark VPN using this phone versus the very best iPhone. I tell you that people don't even realize that Netflix is not the same across countries, that Japan gets more anime, that Slovakia has the biggest total content library, and Korea gets tons of exclusive K-dramas. But that Surfshark VPN is the best way to instant swap your location to access all of it. By the way, you can probably tell these two aren't even close, like they're not even in the same plane. And if you took a plane to another country, then one of the best things about Surfshark is it also means you can use the internet as if you were still home. So you don't need to keep re-authenticating your accounts every 20 minutes, and also your results will match what you expect them to. And when you use the code BOSS, you can get Surfshark for less than $3 a month with an extra 4 months for free and a 30-day money-back guarantee.